What's happening, fishing friends? Spring is knocking on my door here in Iowa. We had a day of almost 50 degrees, so spring fishing is going to be here quick. Now, a couple videos ago, I discussed my top 3 spring search baits for bank anglers. So if you missed that one, I will leave that link down below in the description, and I'll link it at the end of this video. But today, we're here to talk about my top 3 spring finesse baits, or rigs, lures, for bank anglers. Now, wait a minute, Debo, in that spring search bait video, you said spring's awesome for bank anglers because the fish are looking to feed, they're moving up shallow, throw search baits. Yeah, that's true, I did say that, but there are a number of reasons to still keep a finesse rig, just like this, loaded and ready in the spring. The number one reason is because you're still gonna have those days when the bite is tough. You know, whether a cold front has come through, or you have a highly pressured lake because of all the spring traffic out there, or maybe it's just a slick, calm bluebird day. I've always got some finesse rigs ready. Now, the second reason is because I like to use a finesse rig as a follow-up bait. If you've gone through a good point and caught a number of fish with a spinnerbait, you can oftentimes go back through a finesse bait and milk that spot for a few more fish. You never know, one of which might be that big old pre-spawn girl that'll set you a PB. And number 3 is because of that post-spawn funk. Now, after those fish have spawned and they're getting into that post-spawn time, it's often extremely hard to locate fish, but you have to remember, not all the fish spawn at the same time. So while some folks might be out there, trying to catch those fish really up shallow spawning, you can often move out a little bit and catch some of those fish, go into those staging areas or cover before they go out to their summer haunts. So another good reason to have a finesse rig. All right, enough with the background information. Let's get into baits. Number 1, I always have a spinning combo loaded up with the old Ned rig. I know there are a lot of anglers out there who don't like this thing. It's too boring, or it only catches dinks. Some people say I only catch dinks. Well, I'm a big fan of this rig because of how simple it is. You see, the Ned rig is nothing more than a mushroom style jig head, just like that, because of how easy it is for that bait to stand up on end when this plastic floats. The second part of that rig is the soft plastic, usually a stick bait style, kind of like that, just because of how simple and no action, there's nothing to it, it's just a little harmless stick type bait. And I'm telling you, this thing is killer for those hard bottom areas. If you're fishing like a rocky fishing pier from the bank, where that rocks go out and it's got a little drop off, these things are awesome there. With this open hook, you've got a very good hook up to land ratio because it's a little finesse hook right there. It's easy to penetrate the mouth, and as long as you've got it on the right rig, you're going to land a lot of fish. Now, because of that open hook, it's not ideal in all spots. Really thick grass or wood, an open hook does not do the best because you're going to get snagged, and I choose something else for that, and we'll get to that in a minute. Now, I know there are weedless versions of this that you can get, but honestly, I stick to this in the spots where it's pretty open, hard bottom, kind of rocky spots. This thing will get you bit. Now, when it comes to the soft plastic choices of brands, number 1, I always go with the old Z-Man TRD. This thing is extremely tough. If you've never used the Elastec plastic, it's extremely tough. You can catch 15, 20 fish on one little plastic. It floats, so when you throw that Ned rig down there, it's going to come top up just like that and wiggle. Yummy. But sadly, the Elastec plastic does not play well with other soft plastics. So your regular plastisol type plastics, power worms, anything like that. Do not mix these in there, or otherwise you'll have a gooey mess. Now, the second type of soft plastic I would use would be any sort of stick bait. This happens to be a little Yum Dinger. This is a little 4-inch. This can give you a little bit bigger presentation, but still very finessey. There's nothing to it, no crazy action. Put this on one of those little jig heads and you'll get bit. Now, I also like to use, my regular 5 or 6-inch Senkos. When I've got a Texas rigged and it tears up the whole top part of your bait, just clip that off and use the last little 3 inches and you've got a bunch of Ned rigs. I know people say, no, that's wrong. You have to use the TRDs because they float. Well, oftentimes when I'm kind of popping these or working these a little quicker, it doesn't matter if it floats or not. Sometimes I'm just slowly reeling it, popping it over rocks and such. And oftentimes that's how I'm getting bit on the Ned rig. So it doesn't really matter if it floats. You can always reuse and recycle your old plastics. Now, the third type of soft plastic I like to use is some sort of craw imitation. New for this year, I'm going to try these. These are the TRD craws. Pretty cool. They're just a little thing. This is what one looks like rigged up on just a little Ned rig head. Very cool. I would imagine these would be a smallmouth killer. I haven't got a try-in for that yet, but I'm going to imagine they do pretty good. Otherwise, something like this, a Berkley Havoc Pit Boss. These are just the little tiny 3-inch versions. I love these. They're extremely versatile. You can even clip off these, outside 2 little pincher deals. Gives you a nice compact little presentation that might be just a little bit different than what everybody else is throwing. Now, when it comes to picking a color for your Ned rig, I keep it extremely simple. Number 1, for dirty water, I'm going to go to a black and blue flake or some sort of very dark color that's going to make a silhouette in that dirtier water as you get that bait close. You just want it to make an outline. Dark colors are perfect for doing that. Otherwise, it's an all-around go-to if you're only gonna pick up one package. Green pumpkin is always gonna be my pick. It works in clear water. It can still work in dirty water. You might wanna even tip it with just a little chartreuse, but green pumpkin is usually always my go-to. Now, when it comes to the head sizes, if I'm getting the actual Z-Man Finesse shroom jigs, I try to start out as light as I can go. So if I can get away with like a 1/20th or 1/15th, I'm gonna reach for those first. Those lighter weights, if you're fishing against a bunch of, large rocks, those lighter weights will float on top a lot easier. They're not as apt to, fall down into the cracks and get you snuck and snagged, and then you gotta break off. Otherwise, if you're fishing a little deeper, you can always bump up to a 1/10. I like that size as well. Those are usually the two sizes that I keep stocked. Moving on to my second choice, it's gonna be a little finesse jig. I think a lot of new anglers who don't fish a jig, or maybe they've picked up, a big jig like this with a big trailer, they've thrown it and not got bit on it, they kind of lump all jigs together and say, well, I didn't get bit on jigs before, so I don't fish any jigs. Well, I strongly encourage those folks to try a finesse jig, and there are many types of jigs on the market. Generally, a finesse jig is gonna be a little bit smaller profile. You can see this is only a couple inches long, very small. The front end of it's usually trimmed up. It's got a shorter, smaller wire hook, not something big and crazy like this. A big old flipping hook on there. You can see the difference. It's just a compact, smaller version of a jig. Now, remember earlier how I said I don't fish the Ned rig, when there's a bunch of wood and stuff around? That's when I go for these, the finesse jig. The weed guard on here helps so much. You can put this in places that you can't with the Ned rig. And this does happen to be the first type of jig I would recommend. This is the War Eagle jig. It's a finesse, heavy finesse jig. That's what the package looks like right there. War Eagle heavy finesse jig. My man Randizzle got me turned out of these. And speaking of Randizzle, where the heck has he been? We were supposed to do tackle talks down here and some ice fishing. What in the heck? Comment below and let me know what type of adventures you would like to see me and Randizzle go on next. We always have fun. So anywho, the War Eagle finesse jig. I like these because you can fish these on a medium heavy, just regular casting rod. So if you're somebody that doesn't like, going to a spinning rig, you can still throw these on just your regular medium heavy. It's still got a good meaty hook there. That's not going to be very easy to bend out if you're fishing it, with an extra heavy. Maybe you could. That's when a big hook like this comes into play. You can see the difference there, but still a good meaty hook. It's a Gamakatsu hook on there. Still a very good choice if you want to throw a casting rig. Speaking of smaller spinning rigs, that brings me to my second finesse jig, and that's these. These are the little Z-Man Finesse shroom head jigs. They're just little tiny things. Compare it to this jig and look at the difference. That's that War Eagle, and that's the little Z-Man. Just a little guy with, look at that, a little tiny finesse wire hook on there. I always throw these things on a spinning rig. This is a great, very finessey little approach. You can see you could throw that little TRD craw on there. It gives it a good little, kind of beefed up version of a Ned rig. So if you want to fish something just a little bit different, add a little bit more flair, different look to it. These even have a little slight weed guard on there. I would go with one of these. Great choice. They definitely catch fish. Now, my third option would be don't go out and buy anything specific. Just take the jigs that you already use. This happens to be one of my Nichols impact flipping jigs. I love these things. You can see that's a pretty big profile though. If I take that exact same jig and cut it down, look at the difference there. I've cut the skirt, trimmed it up, and added a little trailer. You can go finesse with the exact same type of jig you have. So if you modify your jigs, you can get a much smaller, more finesse looking jig or, presentation with the exact same stuff that you're already using. So don't think you have to go out and buy something different. Trim the skirt down, add a little bit smaller trailer, and oftentimes this will get bit when a big, huge mop jig will not. Again, when it comes to colors, I don't do anything crazy. Black and blue or black and purple for dark water to make that good silhouette. In the clearer water, I like to go with the green pumpkin. It's a very natural, good all-around color. You can even throw this in darker water and just change out your trailer to, a black and blue, something like that. And it's going to give a good contrast on there. So you don't have to go out and buy 50 different types of jigs, especially if you're hucking around, a backpack on the bank. You want to try to stay minimalistic and carry only a few things. So green pumpkin's always a good choice. Now when it comes to sizes, this little 3/8 is usually my go-to. It does everything extremely well in the shallows. The only time I'll deviate from that is when I go to this little Z-Man Finesse. That's a 1/10. So even smaller. So if you notice that they're hitting the jig, but they always seem to hit it on the fall, you can always go to something a little bit smaller and lighter, give it a little bit more hang time as it falls. Okay, last but not least, my third finesse bait is the old stick bait. Now, I know a lot of people are watching going, really, Debo, a stick bait? We know those catch fish, right? But I see a lot of bank anglers, newer anglers going out with these, and that's all they're throwing the whole day. I use these a little bit more strategically. Remember how earlier I talked about follow-up baits? Well, it doesn't get really any better than a stick bait to follow up on, or especially if you're out there, throwing a jig and they're only hitting it on a fall, and that's the only time. That's a great time to bring out the stick bait because it's, a slow fluttering action that stays in that strike zone longer. So if those fish are wanting it, on the way down, stick bait's a great choice. The other good thing about stick baits is you can Texas rig these, and if you've already got some grass growing in your lake in the spring, these are a good option. They don't get hung up very easy, so you can cover those little grass pockets, fish the edges with a reaction bait, and come back through and try to pick up some on the stick bait. And when it comes to brands, a lot of people will say that absolutely the best brand on the market is the Gary Yamamoto Senko. And these lures absolutely are great. They've got a very good salt content, a good fall rate. They definitely get bit. However, the durability of the Yamamoto Senko is not that good, and they're pretty pricey. So if you can afford them, great option. If you want something a little bit more affordable, I would go with the Bass Pro Shop Sticko Worm. Great salt content on these, good fall rate, and they're pretty durable. I try to hit up Bass Pro when they have the sales. You can often get these for, a good sale, $2 or $3 off. I'll stock up on those babies. Now, my third and all-time favorite stick bait is gonna be the Reaction Innovations Pocket Rocket. These things are great because they're just a little bit different than the standard stick bait. As you can see on these, they have like a different little rib that's on them. Also in the middle there, it's thinner, I guess you'd say, toward the middle. The cool part is it's kind of bulbous on each end, so it adds a little bit more bulk. It's a little bit heavier than a standard stick bait, so if you have trouble casting, like a little 5-inch stick bait, these are a great alternative. But they're a little bit beefier on the ends, so I feel like I get a better than average bite on these. Now, I don't know if it's because of the more bulbous ends on these or the middle center. These have more of a wiggle on the way down, so I definitely like that. It gives just a little bit more or a different action than a standard stick bait. Now, when it comes to colors for your stick baits, a watermelon red flake is great for clear water. Very natural, kind of translucent. Very good for that clear water presentation. Now, if you're unsure and only wanted to get one, I would go with just a regular green pumpkin. But in the Reaction Innovations, they have a color called Payback. I stock up on these. I love them. Let me just get one out of here. It's got green pumpkin on one side, and it's got like a bunch of greenish, bluish flakes in there. But on the other side, as you can see, it's got like a blackish, almost June bug color. So it's cool when this goes down, they'll get, kind of a dark and green pumpkin natural dark flash as it's wiggling and going down. One of my all-time favorite colors to throw no matter what color the water. That was Payback in the Reaction Innovations Pocket Rocket. Now when you're fishing that dirtier water, again, I'll go to like a black and blue just so it gives a good outline. Or you can go with a little bit more natural green pumpkin with the chartreuse bottom. Something to give, kind of a bright, flashy color that those fish can key on when the water's a little bit muddier. Now, when it comes to sizes of the stick baits, I personally like to go up. I know a lot of people just throw the regular 5-inch stick baits. Generally, I throw the 6-inch. I feel like it gets you a better overall average bite. You don't get as many of the smaller ones, but you will still, of course, get the little guys with the big appetite that'll eat a 6-inch stick bait. So that is it. Those are my top 3 spring finesse baits, of course. The Ned Rig, the Finesse Jig, and the good old stick bait. But enough of me, I want to hear all of yours, so please leave a comment below and let me know what your top 3 finesse baits are in the spring. Is it a drop shot? I know a ton of people have confidence in that. I'm working it this year. Maybe it's a shaky head. In the past, that's been one of my killer lures. Maybe you just love those little tiny finesse baits. Something like that little guy. Whatever it is, comment below and let me know. I absolutely love hearing from all of you. So thank you all so much for watching and supporting my channel. I'm absolutely blown away by the support I've got from people, but it is getting late. I need to get to bed. Until next time.